Always Cheating Dictionary, Brandon. Been doing the podcast for, I don't know, about 8 years now.
Yeah, we're entering our 8th season.
Entering our 8th season. So as is often the case, when you do a podcast for this long, you start to pick up some weird terms, some terms that you just use all the time without everyone.
It's like a twin language, right? You know, like twins have this, they use terms that other people don't understand.
Yep.
You're tuning into Always Cheating for the first time. You might not know what the heck we're talking about when we say Poku Forever. So maybe we should talk about that.
And one of them actually has taken off, right? I mean, praise the Lord. You know, well, one of them actually did work, and it's out in the world now to the point where people don't even know where it came from. So I take that as a win.
That is a win.
I never failed to remind people where it came from.
Sure.
This term being bus team, which maybe okay. So this is the Always Cheating Dictionary.
Yeah.
So I want to start things off with a dictionary, A to Z. Okay. Because we have an A in here. We have Always Cheating. So let's actually start off with the name of the podcast.
This is probably the question we get most often from new listeners is where does the name of the podcast, Always Cheating, come from? And it's very simple. If you've ever seen Arsenal play on broadcast television or live, you have heard the opposing support sing to the tune of the chimes of Big Ben, "Same old Arsenal, always cheating." And
I feel like usually it's got like more of like a Cockney, like it's like always cheating.
Sure, yeah. And it's always a tinge of hatred. And watching this, this chant happen on broadcast TV as American carpetbagging Premier League fans, we just thought it was great. And when we started the podcast, we immediately gravitated toward that term. Now, Josh, you're an Arsenal supporter, but I think the fact that our podcast is named Always Cheating after a derisive chant against the Gunners, I think we're trying to generalize it. All the teams are cheating.
Well, in the real origin, the actual general origin was, I've told the story before, but you know, I grew up a gigantic sports fan, as many Americans, especially many people from the Midwest, which is where both of us are from. But I was never really big in soccer. I didn't play growing up. I didn't, soccer as we call it, soccer.
Okay.
So I was never big into it. In the 2010 World Cup, I got the bug. I just fell head over heels in love, and so I sort of brought a sports fan's obsessiveness to it once I kind of got into it. It's like 12 years ago now. And one thing that I had a roommate at the time, and both of us were single and just like watching. It was like great fun because we were like, all right, let's pick teams to support. It was like the craziest thing because as a sports fan, you almost always like. You inherit this stuff from your family a lot of the time, right? I'm a Detroit Lions fan. Like nobody would pick the Detroit Lions as a team.
You're the one.
Yeah, I'm like, well, me and like everyone in Michigan though, we all are. Like they're the worst team ever, and like they fill the stadium for every game. It's like so with the Premier League, I was like basically starting fresh, and so we would research clubs and find out more, and we'd research stadium chants. Like we just wanted to like get all in, and that's where we heard the stadium chant. We just thought there's just something very funny about it because it's very British. Obviously the Big Ben chimes.
Yeah.
It's just not. And also, just chanting in general isn't a big thing in the U.S. And outside of like college football, I guess that, and maybe college.
I'm a big fan
sports.
of the defense.
Yeah, a little.
That's about as close as we're getting to unified singing in the stands in
Even
America.
then, I've been to a lot of basketball games. I've never really heard the defense. At least pro games. Not everyone. No one's even paying attention.
Sure.
In the British, I think it's because there's just fewer matches. People are locked in and they're doing these chants. So anyway. We just thought we just loved it. We just thought it was so funny. And so we used to just say always, we'd say it like in a bad British accent, basically, always cheating. And then when we started our fantasy league, like about a year later, that was, I think, sort of a natural, name for the fantasy league. And so then that turned into the podcast. And
here we are now.
Here we are now.
All right, let's cruise down the dictionary page here.
Yep.
What's next in
Going
our glossary terms?
here.
Okay.
Yep. The next one is bus team. Now, this is one you probably have heard before because bus team makes the rounds, and then kind of everyone who doesn't know it, like the question "what is a bus team" comes up almost every day because we get reply, in the response often, and it's basically, and I don't even remember exactly where it came from, but it was just this idea that basically, you want to get in, you want to set your team for next week, you want to do it as soon as you possibly can, right? So once the game restarts, you pop in, you set your team. And why do you set your team right away, Brandon?
You set your team right away because you never know what would happen. You never know when you're going to step out your front door and get sideswiped by a bus. And if that happens, you could end up in the hospital in a coma for a week. And what's the first thing
Short-term coma. Really,
yeah, no,
yeah,
we don't want anything worse than that.
yeah, yeah.
You don't want when you wake up from that short-term coma, your first thought is going to be, shoot, did I set my team? Did I change my captain?
Yeah.
So when you get hit by a bus, you've set that bus team in anticipation of anything that might prevent you from tinkering with your team
Yeah.
before the next deadline.
Yep.
So you're ready to go.
Yeah.
And-
And it apply obviously bus team is just the kind of silly way to put it, but it really is true that, you have a busy week at work, right? Or like there's a lot going on in your family at the time or whatever. And
Yeah.
it can be very easy, especially as the season goes on, especially around the holidays
Yep.
when there's matches like literally like the deadline for one match can sometimes happen while the other game week is still playing. It's like it's so tight. And so
Yeah.
it really does make sense to just go in there, set the team for next week just in case.
Yeah.
As you said, you get hit by a bus, and
And
that's busty.
Strategically, people have found it helpful because it also gives you a window into what your thinking is
Yeah.
early in the week because so much of our fantasy strategy changes. And to have a record of where you were at the start of your week, your
That's true
planning is
too.
good.
Yeah, just to be like, yeah, so like often that is the best version, right? Before you sort of get in your own head. We were talking about this in the preseason, right? Is like you can over tinker, and just this certainly is very true in preseason. I mean, once the game week kicks off, everyone's going to, be like, oh, I had that player
Yep.
in my squad.
Yeah,
And,
right.
but during the season, the same thing happens, right? And Saturday, you have a firm idea of what you need to do, and then by Thursday, you're like, you know what? I'll just wait a week. I'm just gonna hold off.
All right. Do
on
we have a
doing
term
that.
for C, Josh? Or do we
No,
have to jump
we've got
down
to
to?
jump. We only got 3 more to go. I
Okay.
kept it to 5. So the third one is make fantasy fun again.
Right.
Why don't you talk about
What
this
does
one?
this mean? What this means is this is our 8th season of a fantasy sports podcast.
Right.
We started doing the podcast because we had so much fun playing fantasy. And as the podcast went, as our just fantasy lives went, you start taking the game more and more seriously.
Right.
And we found that we were easily frustrated by events with our fantasy team and in the Premier League.
Yep.
And you had to actually become conscious of this and say to yourself, why I started watching the Premier League or playing the fantasy game because it was fun. What can we do to make fantasy fun again? Obviously, there are echoes of certain political slogans that we
Yeah.
don't subscribe to, but fun is,
Yeah.
I think, a secret ingredient for the Always Cheating podcast as
Yeah.
well.
I think we started it around when He Who Shall Not Be Named was rerunning, and he had done some variation on his "Make America Great Again," and so I sort of jokingly said we need to make fantasy fun again, and that's sort of where it started. But I do think there's something to be said for it's more of an aspiration in a lot of ways than it
Yeah.
is an actual guiding principle. I want to do more of it. I don't always succeed at that, although I think we're getting better, maybe. And certainly early on,
It's another slogan. We're getting better.
getting better. Yeah, the Beatles might have beat me to that one, but
They were smart, weren't they?
yeah, they were pretty smart. But so make fantasy fun again. It's just our guiding principle for the podcast itself,
Yeah.
and then for the way that we want to actually, sort of be
Right.
like enjoy the game. Enjoy the game weeks, enjoy the weekends.
Yeah, I think it's a weird one, but one that I think has been special to us over the last 2 seasons, and we'll keep that sentiment going. All right, what else we have?
Poku Forever. The way
Poku
you end
Forever.
the podcast.
Yeah, I often say Poku Forever. It's probably the most obtuse thing that we say on the podcast, and this stems from us having season tickets to the MLS team in New York City. As most soccer teams in America do, they play in a baseball stadium at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
So yeah, part of that was the real main pitfall of being a fan of NYCFC was going to Yankee Stadium. But one of the joys of following NYCFC during that Lampard, Pirlo, David Villa season, in which they were managed by now great on the rise manager
true.
Patrick
That's
Vieira,
true. Yeah.
was
great.
a young man named Kwadwo Poku. I believe he was Ghanaian, and he came in to the NYC lineup, and he was just a fan favorite. Number 88. If you're number 88, you're going to be.
It's like a wide receiver
Yeah.
number.
Yeah, but fans in the stands at Yankee Stadium would I don't know if it was out of boredom or
Yeah.
there just needed to be a spark of energy. And
Yeah.
Poku was always that spark of energy, and fans would either be chanting for him to be brought into the match, or when he came in, we would just go crazy every time
Yeah.
he touched the
I
ball.
feel like every team's got this guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's not the best player on the team, but everybody just kind of loves him the
Yep.
most. And so, so Poku Forever. We actually a lot of people that we've sort of fallen in love with on the pod over the
Lots
years.
of talisman, right?
Alexander Sorloff is the big one. We still have a Patreon tier named after him.
Lord Sorloff.
Yeah, and unfortunately, basically everyone that we have touted has not. We have the Pookie patron tier.
Yeah.
Didn't quite work out.
Sam Vokes.
Sam, the Volkswagen supporters. Yeah, I actually kind of forget sometimes where that Volkswagen comes from. But yeah, it was Sam Vokes.
We did really disrespect Dia Mercy Mbakani by retiring his Patreon tier. So, our apologies, Mbakani.
He's grandfathered in. There's
Yeah,
some
there
people
we
who are
still
still
do have
Mbakani
some, yeah.
tiers. They just
Right.
don't, they're
Right.
grandfathered.
So these figures are very important to us, Josh, and we keep them in our hearts.
Final term, Brandon, is Pure Watch. You'll often hear me on the Twitter talk about a Pure Watch on, it's about like a Monday. I feel like
Okay.
Monday is a prime Pure Watch spot because a Pure Watch is basically a match that you have there are very little fantasy stakes in that match, right? Just no one, often like, I don't want to pick at anybody, but let's say like it's midseason and Bournemouth are playing Crystal Palace or something like that.
Yep.
That's the Monday evening match.
Yeah.
Your players have all probably played already.
Yeah.
Most everyone your rivals have played already too.
Yeah.
It's just a game. Like there's no
Right.
fan.
And it's not derisive, right? It's actually, you get excited for Pure Watches because you're riddled with anxiety throughout the fantasy weekend. How is my team going to do?
Yeah.
It's nice to escape and just watch a game purely for the football, for the soccer, and you can enjoy it as much and remember why it is that you watch the game and enjoy it. Do it with a Pure Watch.
That's right. So that's it. That's our 5 terms, Brandon.
That's all you need to understand us.
That's who we are.
Who are you? Yeah, let's define ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And I hope we develop more terms as we go, Josh, for 8 more seasons. If we've forgotten any things that listeners like that we say,
like we're forgetting one.
Remind us which
now.
one we are forgetting in the comments below.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for supporting the podcast, and thanks for supporting the podcast.
Well,
I don't even know who is. Thank you for supporting us, whoever you are, by listening or even just watching this video right now, Brandon. That counts as support in my eyes.
I agree. Yeah. All right, guys. Poku forever.
Bye.